She claimed she only needed warmth. But the way her breath trembled near his neck said she needed something far hotter. A blizzard can silence an entire world in seconds. Yet for Daniel Reed, the quiet that followed the wind slamming the cabin door shut felt louder, heavier than any storm he had ever guided someone through. In that breathless moment, when the temperature plunged and the lights stuttered before dying completely, the truth hit him like the roar of the wind itself. He wasn't simply stranded in a secluded Montana refuge with a blizzard dropping to minus 40 degrees Celsius outside.
He was trapped with Victoria Hale, yes.
That Victoria Hale, the famously unreachable CEO known for her flawless power suits, her ruthless precision, and a presence that could freeze an entire boardroom. A woman carved from reputation and ice. Yet now she stood here, wholly out of place. She wasn't meant to be here. She wasn't meant to look rattled, and she absolutely wasn't meant to whisper the words that would shatter every assumption he'd ever had about her. Can I slip under your blanket? If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet magic of unexpected connections, then like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly keeps these stories alive. Daniel had never believed life handed people do-overs. Not real ones. As a single father, he had rebuilt everything piece by patient piece, alone. After losing his wife in a tragic car crash 4 years ago, he poured himself into work, freelance contracting, part-time mountain guiding, and raising his daughter Lily, who carried his heart in ways that reminded him both of love regained and sorrow survived. He lived simply, carefully, holding his little world together one day at a time. And today, in theory, was supposed to be easy. Show an out-of-state executive around a potential corporate retreat site, drive her back to town before nightfall. Head home to Lily, who had texted him earlier with, "Daddy, can you bring cocoa tonight? Extra marshmallows?" But fate rarely asks permission. Before rewriting plans, the sky dimmed far too quickly. Snow that had sparkled like sugar that morning thickened into furious curtains by the afternoon. The road blurred. The mountains disappeared behind white curtains. And as the wind howled and visibility plunged, Daniel was forced to veer toward the nearest emergency cabin, a life-saving shelter used when storms turned murderous. When Victoria stepped out of the truck, she shook uncontrollably, clutching her high-end coat as if it were her last defense. The look in her eyes, raw, startled, was something he never imagined seeing from the woman the media painted as unshakable steel. She looked human. Fragile. Cold to her bones. Inside, the fire refused to cooperate until Daniel worked it into existence with persistence and skill. Finally, warm amber flames stretched across the stone hearth, spilling gold onto the cramped cabin walls. But the air still bit at their skin, and the storm outside only grew more violent, a reminder that nature bowed to no one. Not even a billionaire CEO. Victoria sat perched on the edge of the bed, clutching a thin blanket around herself, shivering while staring into the fire. Her sharp, commanding gaze had softened, clouded by fatigue and something deeper, fear maybe, or the exhaustion of someone who had finally run out of places to hide her emotions. Gone was the intimidating armor of a CEO. Her makeup had blurred slightly from the cold. Her dark hair, normally straight and severe, now fell in soft, messy waves. And beneath her coat, the glimpse of a red satin camisole, delicate, unexpected, created a surreal contrast to the violence of the blizzard raging outside. Daniel forced himself to concentrate on survival, on how long the storm might trap them, on how to keep the temperature up. But the cabin suddenly felt too small, the glow of the fire too intimate, and the silence between them too charged with things he had buried long ago. Yet the ending remained exactly the same. Daniel tried to stay focused on survival, on warmth, on calculating how long they might be stranded. But the cabin suddenly felt too small, too warm, too quiet, and too full of things he didn't want to feel. Victoria's breathing finally steadied, but the cold still seeped into her bones. Daniel handed her another blanket, his hands brushing hers for a second. And something flickered in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude and confusion. As if no one had cared for her without expecting a favor in return. She had built an empire. But in that cabin, stripped of title and control, She looked like a woman who hadn't been held by warmth in a very long time. The storm outside intensified. Snow burst against the windows like frozen fists. The temperature kept falling, and the cabin heater gave out with a loud metallic groan before shutting down completely. Daniel felt his gut tighten. This level of cold could become dangerous fast.
He wrapped himself in blankets, adding logs to the fire, trying to keep the air warm enough for both of them.
Victoria watched him, her breath short and uneven. And he could see she was trying to hide her fear. Then came the moment he would replay in his mind long after the storm ended. Victoria hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of her blanket, her voice barely audible over the wind as she whispered the words she had likely fought within herself to speak. "Can I slip under your blanket?" It wasn't seduction. It wasn't romantic. It was trembling voice of a woman who had run entire companies but had no experience asking for warmth, for safety, for something human and simple, and Daniel felt something inside him break in a soft, painful way. Because asking for closeness shouldn't look so terrifying for anyone. He lifted the corner of his blanket without a word, letting her crawl under gently, her body cold against his warmth. She shivered uncontrollably at first, and he wrapped the blanket around them both, feeling her gradually relax as the heat settled between them. Her head rested near his shoulder, her breathing slowing into something steady and delicate. Snow roared outside, but inside the world softened. Victoria stared into the fire while staying close to him, and in that glow, she began to unravel. Not intentionally, not dramatically, but with the quiet, trembling honesty of Simeon who carried too much for too long. She told him about the pressure of being one of the youngest CEOs in the country, about the loneliness that came with success no one could understand, about the way people envied her but never really knew her. She admitted she didn't even know why she had insisted on coming to Montana personally. Maybe she was running from something. Maybe she was searching for something. Or maybe she had simply reached the point where she couldn't breathe in her skyscraper name. Daniel listened in stillness. He didn't try to fix her. He didn't offer cliches or advice. He just let her speak, and that alone felt like something rare to her. Slowly, she shifted, resting her forehead lightly against his shoulder, as if grounding hers in the only warmth she had. Hours passed, something fragile and unexpected grew in that dimly lit room. Daniel told her about Lily, about fatherhood, about the mistakes he had made and the guilt he still carried. Had told her how he sometimes worried he wasn't giving his daughter enough or that he was failing in ways she wouldn't realize when she grew older. Victoria listened, eyes soft, as if seeing him not just as a guide, but as a man who carried a silent strength she had never known in her world of power and polished surfaces. The storm continued its assault, but inside they existed in a quiet pocket of truth. Two people stripped of titles, stripped off masks, sharing the kind of closeness neither had expected nor planned. Victoria eventually grew tired, leaning into him fully. Daniel pulled the blanket tighter around them, feeling her relax, her cold fingers gently curling against his arm. The fire crackled, time slowed. As dawn approached, the blizzard finally softened, allowing pale morning light to seep through the frosted window. Victoria was still nestled against him, breathing peacefully for the first time since he had met her. The storm had forced them into vulnerability, but something deeper had emerged. The realization that connection did care about status or perfection. It only needed honesty, closeness, and amendment where two people allowed themselves to be human together. When she woke, she looked at him with a softness he had never expected to see in her steel-sharp eyes. Not romantic, not impulsive, but deeply grateful. The kind of gratitude that could change a person's heart. She didn't rush to live the warmth. She didn't jump back into her CEO persona. She simply stayed, breathing slowly, as if she wasn't ready to let go of the safety she had found in his presence. They eventually stepped outside the cabin, stunned by the world blanketed in untouched snow under a calm blue sky. The storm had destroyed roads, delayed flights, and forced news alerts across the region. But to Daniel, their all destruction was internal, because he knew that some storms didn't break people, but to bring two lonely souls into the same shelter. In the days that followed, Victoria extended her stay in Montana, claiming it was for corporate assessment. But Daniel suspected the truth was far more personal. She met Lily and he saw something soften in her again. The way she knelt to Lily's height, the way she smiled genuinely rather than professionally. The way she watched Daniel interact with his daughter with a look he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something tender and new. She visited the cabin again with him, standing in the doorway where the storm had trapped them. She looked at the blankets, the fireplace, the walls that had heard their confessions, and Daniel knew she remembered every heartbeat of that night. And slowly, as days turned to a week, the CEO and the single dad built a connection that wasn't forced or idealized. It was real, messy, vulnerable, hopeful. They talked every day. They walked through snowy paths. Victoria learned to brew coffee the mountain way. Daniel learned to open his heart again, something he hadn't known was capable of. No promises were made too quickly. No fairy tales were forced, but when she left Montana, she hugged him with both arms, holding on longer than she intended, whispering words only could hear. Words that weren't quite a confession, but weren't far from one, and Daniel realized that sometimes the most unexpected people enter our lives not during calm days, but during storms that test our strength. Sometimes a blizzard isn't just bad weather. Sometimes it is fate cracking open two hearts at once. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more emotional stories like this to life. Before ending, tell me in the comments, would you trust someone enough to let them into your life during a storm, literal or emotional? And as Victoria looked back one last time before boarding her plane, meeting Daniel's eyes through the glass, he knew what she was really saying without words. The storm may have ended, but something new has just begun.